Oh, it appears that we may be live. There we are. Okay. Now we can do what we gotta do. Technology is such a fun thing. Da-da-da. All right, there we go. Now we can do what we got to do. Look at this. Okay, so happy Technology Saturday, everyone. I am so forever on my toes here at the If You Could See Me project, working with all the things and all the challenges that fall into our laps. So I am Erin Mahone, and I am super thrilled today to be joined by a lovely human. You know, one of the great things about this is that as busy as life is, there are people that you want to talk to and people that you want to hang out with that you never really get a chance to hang out with as much as you would like to. And my guest today, Honesty Liller, is one of those people who, our paths have crossed a million times. We have supported one another's work and stuff in the past, but we never really get to hang out and have a chat. So this is an amazing human being, a person in recovery, a mom, a partner, a business owner, a nonprofit leader, and now an author. And so I am super, super excited to welcome Honesty Liller to the show. Good morning.
Hi,
How are
y'all?
you?
I'm good. I'm doing really well, actually. Just here at my office, ready to chat.
Awesome. Well, I'm so excited to have the opportunity to talk to you and to hear about this journey for you. So, why don't you just start by, telling us a little bit about who you are and, what lights your fire? What
Oh, goodness.
motivates you?
Sure. So, I am first and foremost a woman in long-term recovery from addiction. So, in May, I will have 15 years in recovery if I make it. Yeah, and recovery's given me a ton of different things, but really self-healing, learning how to love myself. I used for a long time, 14 years, and I came to the McShin Foundation when I was 26 years old with nothing, a couple bags of clothes. My daughter was 5, and I could not be a mom to her from womb until I found McShin. And then I started working here, and what lights my fire is I'm the CEO. So I'm a female CEO in this nonprofit space, but also helping the humans that we serve on a day to day basis. So I never forget where I came from, just because I have lots of titles actually I wear now. I always still like to help the women here at McShin, and we've grown significantly at McShin. So we serve a ton of different humans. We just opened our 15th house. So we have a lot of people that we serve now. Since COVID, it's just been wild with
Yeah.
addiction. So yeah, just waking up and being me on a day-to-day basis, whatever that may, transpire throughout the day, and just trying to help people like me, but also women in general that don't have addiction as well.
Amazing. So, how do you feel about being called an inspiration or a hero or, all of those big weighty terms that people like to throw around?
Yeah, yeah, a shiro. It's very humbling. I try to surround myself with younger women. So we have some younger staff, and one of them always tells me like I'm a whole brand, whatever that means. Everything's a vibe now, everything's a brand. There's so much terminology. I mean, I'm 41 and proud of it, but there's so many things that change in the world. And sitting back and thinking about it, I kind of am. I've self-made. I had nothing when I came into recovery, a ton of debt, a ton of false hope, a ton of pain and trauma and so many things, that I've built the life that I have today from scratch, literally from
Mhm.
scratch, and surrounded myself with awesome leaders and role models and stuff like that. But I've really had to work hard, on my own, and learn like how to, you know, fundraise, like how to write a book, how to be a mom. I had to learn all of these things because I didn't have a lot of that growing up as a child. And certainly when I started using, stuff just went downhill, and I didn't really have much of anything but drugs. So it's humbling, but it's also like I've learned through this process too. I do Peloton. I'm obsessed with it. I love it. I promote it everywhere I go. And this morning, Kendall Toole, she's one of my favorite instructors. She said, you have to celebrate that shit. And I cuss a lot too.
Please.
But yeah, like, and that's the stuff that I try to instill, not just in the humans that are around me and my daughter and my son and my husband and everything, but me, like celebrate. And I don't feel like I do that as much as I should, because of recovery, we're taught to be humble and
Mhm.
kind and love everyone and do what we can for others. But like, even this whole book process, like I haven't had time to like, yay, thanking my audience, thanking my supporters and stuff like that. But like, really, you wrote a book,
Yeah.
along with your millions of other things that you do. But it's cool. I mean, I call myself a real model, and it's in the book and why I do that. I don't say role model for myself, because even in here in the organization, it's like blood, sweat, and tears. Just because I'm a female CEO, I own a small business with a partner and an author and a mom and a wife and all these things. It's also, I cry, I break down. We were just talking before that, like winter depression. Like I still have things going on. It's cool to be, someone's real model, but it's also, the biggest thing is that vulnerability for me, and like really sharing some deep things that leaders still go through, and how we overcome them, or how we slowly get through them. Because I think that's how the world can change, instead of I'm up here, you're down here,
Right.
I'm super cool. I don't know. I just try to stay, present in my environment as much as possible.
Right. Well, I mean, it's an interesting sort of juxtaposition of that, focus on humility and that, commitment to healing and providing that space and setting that example, and also just, that rah party that sometimes we want to have for ourselves, or sometimes we forget to have for ourselves, that, well, I did these things. I accomplished this stuff. So talk to me a little bit about the process of writing a book, and what made you want to do that, and what was that like for you? Because, I've been through that process too, and
Yeah.
it's a thing.
Yeah. It's a thing. It's a whole lot of things.
Yeah.
I don't know. A few years ago, you'll read about it in my book. I had somewhat of an unspiritual awakening. It was just like I was in this. I had pink hair. I don't call it a midlife crisis by any means. I feel like I have a ton of life to live. It was just like my relationship at home. The monotony of life. And expectations that were put on me as a female leader of this organization, and in honestly in the recovery community and so many other facets. And it was just like, okay, do I want to leave McShin? Do I want to go do something else? Because I mean, I started working here when I was 5. As soon as I moved out of the female recovery house, I started working here. So this is all I've known as a career, is working at McShin. Really, besides the small jobs when I lived in McShin. So I was like, is honesty, Liller, always going to be McShin? I was just, what is life? Kind of going through that phase.
Mhm.
So then I started following. I started taking a lot of negativity out of my life, and a lot of, honestly, on social media. I started blocking, unfriending, deleting, and really started focusing on Instagram, less on Facebook, because Instagram, I feel like, was just way more positive, because I don't know, the vibe was just more positive. I'm on both still, but so then I just started following these awesome women writers and these awesome, women leaders, not just in the recovery addiction space, just in general. And I was like, gosh, I wonder if I can write a book. And this was like 2.5 years ago or something. And I talked about it for like a year, and then COVID hit, obviously. And it was like, okay, maybe I will have the time. And then I felt God just put all these people and these ideas in my life. I'm a big believer on signs and spirit and all of that as well. And Kim Ely, you know Kim, I do
Mm-hmm.
believe, she
Yes.
kept showing up at the Synapse meetings that I was popping in. And I was like, let me just ask her. So I called her, I had a conversation with her. She was willing to work with me and make payments instead of a big, huge lump sum to edit my book. And then I was going to self publish and hybrid publish. So I was like, okay. So it was just really that courage to really, okay, I want to do this. I want to do this. I want to do this. And I told my husband 8,000 times, and he, to be frank, said, write the effing book. And because
Stop
he was
talking
just,
about it
yeah,
already.
he was just like, it was all in love, not probably somewhat, probably some, I'm sick of her talking about it, but also like having the confidence in me, because me and him go through a lot in the book. It's my life, but I keep saying the book because it's my life, that we have overcome and stuff. So we're in a completely different place, and he's just like, do it. So then I did an outline for about a year, and then I just slowly started writing, just typing at nights and weekends. And it was hard, it was traumatic. A lot of things came up that I thought I kind of overcame in the 12 step work, but I clearly did not. And just a lot of the stuff with my daughter and what I did, to her. And now she's a young woman. And so it's just like all these emotions, but it's funny too. If you know me, I like to laugh and make fun of myself and stuff. So, but it wasn't an easy process by any means, but it wasn't as super hard as I thought it was. But it's a super quick read. It's not a Glennon Doyle 250 pages, type book. It's a kind of like in your face, this is my reality. If I can do it, you can do it too type of book. That's what I wanted it to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then now it's here. But the after, it's the after that's the most stressful, I feel. After it was done, edited, ready to get on Amazon and wherever, Ingram Spark and everything. After that, that's when my stress really kicked in high gear, because there's so much that comes with that didn't work, to be honest, like with Amazon and stuff. So I've had a lot of challenges with them. So I kind of really promote Barnes and Noble a ton because they've been great to me. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, that's good. Um, no, I'm curious about, even though, and I've said this before, even though, I had been around, telling all my stories and putting all my business out there, there was something about like the first day that I got the first shipment, the first box of books from my publisher, where I was like, oh my God, people are going to read this.
Mm-hmm.
This is like, I don't know if it's
Oh yeah.
when I had my first kid, I also didn't understand the magnitude of it until I was like, until I had to get like clothes for her for every single day. And then I went, oh my God, this is not temporary. This is like going to
Yeah.
be forever, right? Like, so there are those moments where the sort of the reality of the situation set in, at least for me in my life. So I'm curious about, if you had that moment where you went, oh shit, what did I do?
Totally a bunch of those. Well, to be honest with you, to be fair, I got my husband and my daughter to read the book before I even moved any. Like I talked about it, and I started writing it. We were all on the same page. But my it's a lot of deep stuff about my husband and things that we've
Mhm.
gone through that a lot of people, close friends know, but not the community at
Right.
large. And there's some stuff that John and I, which is the co-founder of McShin, go through. And then everything with my daughter, because I
Right.
used until she was 5. I used my whole pregnancy with her. So they both read it. And my husband got the very first, before you get like the real copies, the first version that I didn't like. So I changed some things. But my daughter was just like, I asked her, I was like, so what do you think? And she's like, well, it's interesting. So it's just like, and my son is 12, and I've already told him, I mean, there's books all around the house. I was like, you can't read it, bro. Like,
Right.
it's got some heavy
Not
stuff,
yet.
especially about his father and stuff that, when it's time, we'll talk about all of that. But yeah, so hopefully he will stick to his guns and not do that. But my daughter already knew a lot of the stuff,
Mhm.
not all of it. I think also it was really my family and like stuff like that. Like a lot of them didn't know some things too. But I mean, Adam and I, which is my husband, again, are on another whole planet right now. So we're just like on another, we went to therapy and everything. We're on another whole level. That was the past. This is our present. So
Right.
he's like, oh, he's like, just write it. It's fine. Um, and just let's go. And then it went. So no one has like contacted me except for I had one troll out of all this whole few months, that he was very, very evil and he scared me. But other
Mhm.
than that, I've had nothing but positive, I
Right.
mean, I'm sure there's haters out there like, just because it's naturally that's going to happen.
Sure.
No, I mean, yeah, when I got the first batch, it was like, are people gonna read it? And I think a lot of that kept me from writing it too, was like,
Mhm.
even though I'm this, recovery lady and CEO, like I still had so much negative doubts on like big projects,
Yeah.
I wanted to start. But it's been a beautiful, I mean, I've gotten nothing but beautiful, positive, feedback and how it's helped people, not just in
Mhm.
recovery so far, specifically women, that have reached out through social media. So it's really cool. But yeah, hell yeah, it's some stuff in there that it's just like, I don't know, it's traumatic, but it's also shows like specifically families that their children or their loved one is still using. Like it shows them like, damn, she's been through hell, even in recovery, and she's still not using drugs,
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's at the end of the day, that's all that matters to me, and that my
Mhm.
children and my husband are okay and
Right.
they're good. So
So I think that that is a really difficult place to be for families, who are, who do have a person that they love that is actively using. And, it's hard to imagine that things can get better.
mm,
And so that's such a huge gift that you give people to show that, that it is possible to go through the recovery process and to imagine that life could be completely different.
yeah, and even my own and you'll read like how, it affected my family, all of my using. I mean, I started using when I was 12, so and I overdosed when I was 17. So and I didn't find McShin. Well, my mom found McShin when I was 26. So I put them through hell for a very long time. So I have that lived experience of knowing, for a certain extent, knowing what I did to them. There was many a years and many a time that that's not in the book because I cannot literally remember. And there's a little statement in the beginning of the book. I did change a bunch of names because I just honestly, after you read it, you'll know why I didn't want to contact them, but also like this is what I remember, and a ton of it I don't. I'm a super smart woman, and I think I'm amazing, but it's also drugs definitely affected my brain cells, so I don't
Mhm.
have all of my memories. But I think the biggest thing is also like the families that are out there, like it's important for them to speak up too. And I think it has changed a lot, probably about the past 5 years for the recovery movement, is the family members that are speaking up, those that have lost loved ones, but
Mhm.
also those that their loved one is in long term recovery or either in treatment or whatever. It's the more voices and the more things like you're doing out in the community, I think that is going to pack a punch, to the addiction epidemic for sure. And just telling our stories, you do all this stuff with stories. You know how powerful stories are, and then these are just not made up stuff. This is this is our legit life, and if
Right.
more humans did that out there, I just think this world could be such a better place. But so many people still are, I don't even say keep up with the Joneses, I say keeping up with the Kardashians.
Right.
Everybody right now is just like social media, who's this and it's just like it's overwhelming what's going on in the world right now, so why not try to sprinkle a little, little pink into the world around you. I mean, that's all we can do. I mean, I know I have a platform and you have a platform to do so much more, which we do. You're doing it right now and I'm doing it right now. So,
Mhm.
but it's a heavy world right now.
It is, there's no question that it is a heavy world. And I think that we are also in a world that struggles to be able to sit with the discomfort that comes up when we tell our stories or when we
Mhm.
provide these spaces for folks to be able to share their stories, and that's sometimes that can be discouraging, and at the same time it shows me how much it's needed, right? That
Mhm.
that it is hard, it's challenging, and it makes folks sad. We don't get taught or socialized to you know be uncomfortable, right?
Mm.
And so that's
Yeah.
why we have all of these different addictions and different things that we distract ourselves with or that we numb ourselves with, whether it's substances or right now I think the biggest addiction that we all have is social media, is like
Mhm.
making, am I okay, am I okay, am I okay, let me look and let me check and let me see and let me figure out if I'm doing it right. I'm not sure, I'm not sure, I'm not sure. And so it does become, social media is this amazing platform, and it's also a place where we're all constantly comparing ourselves to one another and trying to figure out if what we're doing is okay.
Mhm. And the filters and the photoshops and
Right.
um I'm not, whatever. Do you? I
Right.
just don't do any of that stuff. First off, I don't have Snapchat. I just have Facebook and Instagram. So I'm not real sure what you can do. The little girl working here, she's teaching me about reels and all that. Like, I just do what I can. But I don't know. I think putting I was listening to a podcast the other day, and anyway, I'm obsessed a little with the house, like the Real Housewives. That's one of my, I don't want to say vice because I just think some of them are just awesome. But I
Something
was
you
listening,
enjoy.
yeah, that I enjoy it. This a couple of the franchises. I don't watch all of them. I don't have time, but Bethany Frankel, she's no longer on the Housewives, but I do listen to her podcast every now and then because she's doing amazing stuff with Ukraine. So I donated to that. Anyway, she's legit, and she was saying, like, it was funny, like talking about like the Kardashians, like they photoshop, which I didn't know, that they photoshop things in their pictures and stuff that they prevent, and I didn't realize that. And she's like, why don't you just, it was just cool, she just went on this, she calls them rants, and she went on this rant,
Right.
why don't you just photoshop a new husband and photoshop this and this, and she's like cussing and going crazy. And I appreciate, like, when celebrities are so real
Yeah.
about stuff like too,
Hmm.
because raising a daughter in this environment has been hard,
Hmm.
really hard. The drugs is one thing, and that was my story, but really just like the self-esteem and what a woman is supposed to live up to these days is just a lot different from when I was 20, and
Oh
so it's
yeah.
been some difficult things that we've had to go through as a family because of just trying to compare, and like, in his bullying, and there's so much stuff that we just used to ride our bike to this is pre-drugs, but to the country store, and you just can't do that as much at all anymore. And I guess it's just our world has changed. But anyway, I just appreciate like the realness of people, and
Right.
not just always, oh, look at me, my cute family. Like, oh my gosh, my son on the way here, I was like, I'm gonna be late. We're not gonna. He's like, I want to go to Sheets. He don't ever come with me either, by the way, and because he's 12 and he's too cool. And I was like, yeah, I was like, Sheets. I was like, it's going to be packed. It's Saturday morning because he likes to get the French toast sticks and order them. And I was like, I'm gonna be late. I'm gonna be late. And Dad, I wasn't late, but I was close. And I was just like, it's just like those things are like frustrating. Like, we got to talk more about those things when your child is just like, you want to like just leave it. My first thought was leaving him at Sheets. I was like, I'm just gonna text him. I'm gonna leave you here. I'll be back. Well, after I'm done, I'll come back and get you. You're safe. We're in Hanover County. You're good. Obviously I didn't. He's in the other room eating his French toast sticks. But I was like, I told you so. But anyway,
Right?
so like just stuff like that. I think my next venture is probably a blog or something. I kind of want to be like the Carrie Bradshaw of like life, just like not the Sex in the City part, but just like the stuff that I see around here sometimes that blows my mind. I'm like, to what? So anyway, just like I think I was thinking about that last night. Like I'm just gonna start being Carrie Bradshaw, but like just what I see on a day-to-day basis and like how to overcome life on a day-to-day basis.
Well, you're already doing that though,
Yeah.
right? Like you do that, you set that example anyway. No, I mean, I think that parenthood for me was in particular like has
Mm.
been the best uh educator, grounder,
Mhm.
like uh, who do, cuz I was in a real bad way before becoming a parent and making all the wrong decisions and not putting myself in the best situations and really irresponsible and all the things. And it was becoming a parent and deciding who do I want to be in this kid's eyes, right? Like how
Mhm.
do I want to be perceived from them? And now let's work backwards and figure out what the fuck that looks like and
Mhm.
how do I, heal from all this bullshit, you know, to be able to do that. And, I mean, my oldest is 18 and a half, and, I feel like I figured that out, to some degree about 12 minutes ago. So, poor thing, she's going to have her own therapy and her own stuff to overcome, but you know, maybe the other two will be in a little bit better position.
Yeah.
But, there is some sort of like magical thing that happens where we go, "Oh, it's not just me anymore." So, and
Yeah.
it takes a while, but, talk to me about that transition for you, about, deciding to stop using and to go into recovery and, and I know that this is in the book, and so I don't want you to tell me the whole book, but, just like, is there a bit of wisdom or a moment that you can point to?
Sure. Well, gosh, I get to be honest, I just wanted medication to help with my heroin withdrawal. I mean,
Right.
I'm just being honest. My stepmom, she knows John, and I came here and I stayed for like one night. I left and then I came back, but I couldn't hear if when you get addicted to opiates, it's your whole entire central nervous system. Everything gets your dope. We call it dope sick. You're sick if you don't have it. I had to use it all day, every single day, and I wasn't listening to anything back then. It was just John and two other men. There was no female staff here. There was one female house and two male houses. So they had three recovery houses at the time. This is back in 2007. And I needed that medication before I could do anything. My plan was literally to stay here for a week, detox, and then Adam and I, which is now my husband, but then my boyfriend that I met in treatment. Read the book, you'll read all this great love affair. And something happens living in the house with other women like me. It was like literally crawling every single day and hating myself and everything I did to Destiny, and my family, but specifically Destiny. I couldn't have her. My mom had her, and I would see her like every Saturday. I worked, pretty much immediately, and had to go to meetings every day of my life in order to save my life. So McShannon, 12 steps saved my. I wouldn't be here without either one. And I didn't know all this was going to happen. Like in the beginning, I was a mess. I was like 40 grand in debt. I was 26 years old. I was never went to college. I did graduate high school a year early, but only to support my drug habit. I needed to work full time. I was a mess. I was broken, beat up. Um, I was a hot, hot, hot mess when I came here. And just that peer to peer connection, I mean, is what saved me. Just living with other women, the recovery community. There was a few women in the 12 step community that adopted me because there was no women here. It was barely any women living in the house with me for those 5 months, not many at all. And then when I moved out, I got my daughter back. She was 5, and I lived with my older sister. And I started working at McShane. I started working here and helping the other women. So I guess I was the first official female staff. And every day was a struggle. I mean, when you use drugs for that long, for 14 years, the last 9 was heroin and other opiates, but it's hard to just, flip a switch and I'm never going to use again. I knew I would probably drink alcohol one day just because I was so young, and even a glass of wine at dinner or something, but haven't done anything in almost 15 years. And I quit smoking cigarettes when I moved out of McShane. So I was about 6 months in recovery. So that's been, 14 and a half years now. And life just slowly, I just built a life very, very slowly, like really slowly. I lived with my sister until I was a year in recovery. And then Adam and I got our own apartment with Destiny, my daughter. And then you'll read a lot. I mean, stuff kind of went slow, but also fast. I got pregnant with my son. I got married. It took me 8 years to fix my credit. So, it was like all of this happened to me throughout so many years, my addiction. So it took me a lot of years to fix a lot of my damage. And I'm still working on it. I mean, even all these years later, I don't have all the answers. I don't have everything there is to know about recovery. I'm very well educated on the subject for sure, but I feel like as a human, we have stuff to learn every single
Yeah.
day, no matter what. And that is my job while I'm here. Life is way too short. I'm surrounded, unfortunately, by death as well. For the past probably 5 years, it's really, really been bad. So I don't really take much for granted. But the peer to peer saved my life. McShane saved my life. 12 step saved my life. And my recovery's evolved, and I don't do as much 12 step anymore. But I'm still involved, in different pathways as far as exercise, holistic, and stuff like that. So 100%, someone that has shot heroin and been pregnant is going to save my life before anything else could have. So that's just what I do,
Right.
now is try to do the same thing with the women that we serve.
So I feel like one of the most effective and most underutilized and appreciated aspects of mental health treatment in general is peer support.
Mm-hmm.
It is it is you can't say enough about it, right? And I feel like in traditional systems it is not as appreciated, by people who have a lot of letters behind their names. And
Mm-hmm.
it's because they, a peer doesn't often have a lot of letters behind their names, or because they didn't, and so it becomes this like power structure situation. And I I think it's so important to sort of highlight the value, especially in this space, because I feel like a lot of people don't know about peer support, the peer recovery movement. And, I think that it it doesn't get its due in terms of, what is effective and how helpful it is for somebody to see themselves in another person who is further down the path than they are. And as a therapist, I don't hear enough about, both as a therapist and as a person who's worked in community mental health for years, I don't believe that it's something that what's the word, funded well enough. It's not something that is supported
Mm-hmm.
well enough in our mental health and substance use recovery systems, largely. So I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about that, and tell the audience what it means to be a peer, not just like a peer, but a peer recovery specialist. And what is that?
Sure. So I'm a CPRS, so I'm certified through the state of Virginia. Whatever, that's cool. I got some letters behind my name. I took the
Right.
class. I do everything I'm supposed to do on that end. But really the authenticity of McShane is what has worked for almost 18 years here at McShane. It's really like been there, done that, not just again the addiction piece, it's that recovery piece. How do I get my license back? How do I get my children back? How do I pay off this debt? How do I do all of this without using drugs? Because
Mhm.
it's heavy. When every human that we serve that comes has some type of something they have to fix. We don't get many people that call McShin up and say, "Hey, my life is groovy and great. Can I come live there?"
Right.
That's just not reality. They come with
Mhm.
baggage and a ton of it normally, and a lot of parents that don't have their children. And so the biggest, so the peer movement is definitely nationally getting better, at least in the addiction recovery space. It is not where it should be by any means. There's a lot of federal dollars, finally coming down and paying for these services. Medicaid here in Virginia,
Mhm.
has been expanded, so that helps. I mean, we don't take it, but other organizations do. So it's happening. It's the need is still huge for,
Right.
like I told you, we have 15 houses now. That's like huge. That's a lot of people. It's, I want to say, 150 probably beds we have now, as of yesterday, I think. So there's a lot of people, out there, but Richmond is now the mecca of like recovery housing. There's a ton of recovery houses now, but the peer connection is not only like one of the biggest answers, I think, and that's mental health. That is, any type of situation, if you can talk to someone that's overcome it, and not just overcome it gracefully. Like, I,
Right.
don't do drugs because I just don't do drugs anymore. Like, also talk about the pains and the struggles and
Yes.
everything that you've been through, because I think that is where some of the negative outlook on peers comes from. Because there's two facets. Number one, I think the professionals, we went to college for this many years. We should be looked upon, as the answer or whatever. Even though peers, I say, and I don't discredit the humans that do all that, because that's hard as shit. But the life that I led because of my addiction, that is the hard knock diploma that I have.
Yep.
And it doesn't make me better than anybody else. It's just something different about being able to sit across. For example, I had a woman here, and now we're super close, but she was pregnant. She didn't know the father of her child. She was smoking crack. She hated everybody here. She hated all of the staff, right? So she came up here, sat in my chair right there. I made the time for her, shut my computer. We talked for, I don't know, 30 minutes about my story. She was ready to run down the road, fully pregnant, run down the road and get crack. To be honest with this is real life that happens here
Right.
all the time.
Mhm.
So that peer connection, me telling her my story about my daughter, how I used my whole pregnancy, how life was, how I am today. She lived here. We ended up hiring her when she had her baby. She had to, we found her somewhere else to go because we don't take babies yet. Um, and then now, like, we all kind of adopted her son. She just picked up his birthday present, his fourth birthday. So, like,
Mhm.
stuff like that. There's nothing like it. Not saying I'm anything special, but me being able to relate to her made her stay,
Right.
and live here. And then we hired her so she could, save money for her child. And, that's the stories, that have the power to me. But again, everybody, that we serve, we have a ton of co-occurring. Like, we are not equipped as peers to help with some of this, other mental
Right.
illness that they have. So we
Mhm.
have partners in the community and relationships in the community. We have vans, we have cars, we take them to their psych appointments,
Mhm.
detox, whatever. So it's a whole system of care, that
Right.
sometimes I didn't need all that. I needed detox meds for sure. But a lot of people that we serve, especially nowadays, there's just more services. So we have awesome people in the community that we work with that. So,
Right.
yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't want to, discredit in any way, the professionals in the in the field, and peers are also professionals.
Hmm.
So I'm not definitely not discounting that, but at the same time, there are things, I have never been addicted to substances, right?
Hmm.
I can't, share that experience with someone. I can talk about trauma, I can talk about mental health, I can talk about my own struggles in that way, but there are things that I can't relate to on a person to person level. And yes, my training is, helps me to be able to fill in that gaps, but at the same time there's no replacing that story that you just told. And I think that it's not about one being better than the other. It's about understanding, like, this isn't for you, this is for our audience. It's about understanding that, there are lots of different paths to becoming yourself, right? To healing.
Mhm.
And we can't just put everything in one bucket. And having all of these different types of experiences and preparation and education and awareness at the table to be able to provide that support just guarantees better outcomes.
Mhm.
Doesn't guarantee a perfect outcome, but it
Mm-mm.
certainly sets people up for being in a situation where they are getting their needs met because it's what they need, not because what professionals tell them that they need.
Right.
And I do feel like, the field is moving in that direction. And I'm thrilled to hear that, that peer recovery, is getting more funding and more recognition. I am, sad on the other side of that because this is who I am. I have to point out, all the holes in the shit and I am sad that that is only happening because we had to get to the point where we had a crisis,
Mhm.
right? Like
Sure.
we can't over overestimate the reality of the opioid crisis, the addiction crisis, the mental health crises that we're living through in our country right now, and the
Mhm.
fact that we don't have enough uh quote unquote licensed professionals to meet that need meant that the government had to do something else. Whereas if it had seen the issue on the front end and had more of a mind for prevention and um providing supports in our communities that that helped people be able to access it before there was a crisis, then maybe we wouldn't be in this situation. And so it's important to me to also kind of shine a light on that. I don't want us to have to get to crisis points before we respond to these issues.
Yeah, and like, we've been doing the Mick Carol McDade is the Mick and McShin. She is a lobbyist for the recovery movement. She's been doing it, I want to say over 30 years. So she's been
Mhm.
knocking on those doors
Right,
in
exactly.
DC forever.
Forever.
And John, and they taught me all about advocacy, and I've been doing it now for all these years. So
Mhm.
it's just now with the Sacklers and all of that and everything coming out, and it's just like these past 5 years where it's really, I mean, we already hit over 100,000 humans that have overdosed and died. Yeah, yeah. And it's still like there's money out there and there's like conversations and stuff, but it's still in some areas, it's still that lock them up phase,
Right,
mentality. Dealing with policymakers, and God bless them, but sometimes it's very difficult for me as a human, and like knowing what some answers can be, and then it's still like they say okay, and then it still doesn't happen. It's just like, golly, come on. So I don't know. So it's a big, and now with everything going on there's so much going
right.
on right now that it's like my husband puts on the news. I'm like, bro, I can't do that. Like, I
Turn
can't
it off.
watch. Well, when I walk in and Fox News is on, well, he's bipartisan, so he does Fox and CNN. I'm just like, all these, they're just so aggressive, and I get it, but it's also like I just live in a world not where it's sheltered by any means because
No.
I am a real person, but it's just very overwhelming right now to like even be a human on this planet, not just in my field and like
No.
all of the
Everywhere.
stuff going on. It's just like
Mhm.
this is just heavy. So it's really my job to like try to do what I can, fight for what is right, which I do, and also spread like this some fun and peace in the world because God knows we need it right now.
Absolutely. We absolutely do. Um, so you just mentioned something. One of the things I just recently completed another podcast series, kind of digging through some of my own trauma and telling my own story. Um, And, one of the things that I explored in that process was this this idea in our culture where we decide who deserves compassion and who doesn't
Mm,
based on their own choices. And if they made a bad choice and had a bad outcome, they are unworthy of, you know, kindness, compassion, dignity, respect, all of those things, or at the very least, they're unworthy of our support.
mhm,
And based on what you just said about that whole lock 'em up mentality, there's a lot of that in the addiction world. There's a lot of
mhm.
that sort of like, well, you got yourself into this situation or you just need to stop using. And, I'm curious um how you respond to that, how you handle that sort of thinking as both a person in recovery and a person who supports people who are, newly in recovery, because people aren't nice.
Yeah, like, gosh, lots of ice cream. Yeah, seriously. I mean, some days I'm just like, I'm not eating ice cream no more. I'm gonna take, but it's like feels like a lot lately. Look, some people, some humans deserve to have a consequence for their actions.
Oh, for
All really
sure.
depends. But if someone overdoses and has a tiny bit of dope or heroin in their needle and they get 5 years that's insane to me. It's completely
Right.
insane. Instead of throwing them in jail, making what they need to do, example, money, whatever they need, for the moment out of them, send them to treatment, divert them, have a great diversion program. So we're in 3 jails right now. McShin, we deliver peer recovery support services in Richmond Justice Center, and then Hanover County, Pamunkey, and then RSW, which is about 2 hours away. And we do really well. The Richmond just had their graduation yesterday. So we're doing our part, and then, but I always go back to this. I had pink hair. It was this public forum at Richmond Times Dispatch, and the sheriff at the time, it was this whole big thing because like we came in a pack. It was like 150 of us with McShin shirts, like addiction survivor. It was like something out of a movie. It was wild. So, and he was like saying, I mean, God bless him, he's done great work, but also like trying to tell us, like, the audience, like, explain why they should still be locked up. And he's like, well, we don't lock them up for using. But 2 seconds earlier, the statement, so I screamed out loud. I was like, yeah, you just said, and I didn't mean to, but it's like, we have to still call, just because they're elected officials, we still have to call them out in a kind, loving way. They need to be, we vote for them. It is our money that puts into their campaigns. We have to remember that. And I think a lot of people forget that. Like, we are voters. So they're accountable. We're their boss. So they're
Right.
accountable for their constituents. And to be able to, have platforms, and we do our podcast, Get in the Herd, that actually goes into 48 jails across the United States, which is amazing. Well, all of our McShin's videos do. So the inmates get to see so many hope dealers and so much, which is so radical. But I think anytime that we can calmly and effectively write editorials, or have news articles or news stories, or do anything that we can, it's annoying. It's annoying that so many people get locked up just for being me. Before I came to McShin,
Right.
I committed a ton of felonies, but again, I had this spirit looking after me to put me in a position where I am now, in order to help all the people that I do. But it's just frustrating, especially like, gosh, these kids, and I call them kids because they're just younger than me, but like, even a violation, like a piss test, like fail one piss test, and they get like a tremendous, but I mean, the probation officers, they're overwhelmed. There's so many different levels to
Yes.
unpack here.
Right.
But if we just had, like, a direct, which McShin does good. We get a ton of people from jail. We get a ton of people from our programs and outside of because we get people from other states now that see our videos on the what are those things? iPads or whatever that the jails provide them or they pay for. I don't know how we give all of our stuff away for free, so I don't really know how that works. But it's just like still advocating for change laws. We do a ton of stuff with the General Assembly every single year. We go to DC. We do all of that. We have Nathan as our director of outreach, but John and I still do a ton of that as well. So we make a difference for sure, but it's still unfortunate. It all depends on who's in charge, like what
Right.
administration that we have, and not just federally but locally.
Mhm.
Um, so I don't know. It's not looking, I don't know how it's looking right now here in our state. It's just, it's some things have changed that's not too cool. But then on the other perspective, there's some good things that are happening too. So
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's why you keep showing up, right? You keep doing the work,
yeah.
you keep putting the message out there. I think it it's about building that one-to-one connection. And that feels
Mhm.
huge because there's, 300 million people in the world, but or in America, but the idea that, our legislators legislate the way that they do because we let them, because we
Mhm.
elect them, but it's also because there is that sense of like punishment is the only answer uh within our culture, right? Like we
Mhm.
and so the more you continue to do this amazing work and put this out there, open these conversations, the more we have these conversations in places like this, tells the story that these are actually people. These are human lives, and that people are capable of overcoming so much and doing so much better and getting the skills and the tools and the support that they need. It is possible to, turn your life around, and sending someone to prison, first of all, is, in many cases not the way. Um,
Mm.
to help them get what they need to be able to, be in the world, in their best way. Um, you know, but we have to start expecting people to, yes, consequences are necessary, of course, but oftentimes our consequences are, they're natural consequences. Like anybody who's made a really bad decision has received natural consequences that are pretty terrible. And so we don't
Mhm.
necessarily need every person around us looking at us like, we're dirty, broken, disgusting people who don't deserve dignity or respect or love or kindness. And so that's a one-to-one thing. That's an every person coming together and treating each other with kindness and respect. That's, that we do that, and then our legislators don't continue to make the laws that they make. And so it starts with us, right? It starts with
Right.
you and me having this conversation, and you doing the amazing work that you do every single day. um Honesty, I'm immensely inspired by you and respect you so, so, so much. Thank you so much for being here. Please tell our audience where they can find all of the amazing things that you're doing.
Sure. Just mcshin.org is our website. My book is called Scattered Pink. You can find it Barnes and Noble, Amazon, the ebook and paperbacks on that too. Trying to get it into stores now, so hopefully Barnes and Noble soon. But yeah, just mcshin.org. You can follow me on Facebook, Honesty Liller. Instagram is Diary of a Woman in Recovery. So yeah, this has been an awesome conversation.
Thank you so much for showing up
Thank
with
you.
all of yourself as you always do. We will put all of Honesty's, contact information and all the stuff in the show notes when the show comes out, and we'll put it in the comments here so that folks can find you. They can buy your book, buy her book. And
Mm.
is there anything else that you want to leave us with today?
Just learn how to love yourself a little bit more today so you can love another human. Just try to make the world just a more radical place to live.
Radical kindness,
Yes,
radical
totally.
self-compassion.
Totally.
I love
Yeah.
it. It's absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for
Thank
being with me,
you.
and have a wonderful weekend. Bye, everybody. I'll see you. Oh, so many things are happening at If You Could See Me. If you are in Richmond or anywhere in the world, please go to ifyoucouldseeme.com and get your tickets for our show this week. If You Could See Me presents When I Grow Up, written and performed by Donna Joyce, who is one of our family members here at If You Could See Me. She has written a wonderful solo show that I have been in support of this whole time and been working with her. And I'm so, so honored to be producing this event in Richmond, our very first live on stage in person event in 2 years. And
Mm.
2 months, 2 years and 2 months, 2.5 months, and check out all of our podcasts and all the different ways that you can support us. Become a subscriber on Patreon for as little as $1 a month. You can support us, and we will give you swag and name you and thank you, and we love you, and thank you to everyone for all the love and support that you give us. We will see you very soon.